Hey everybody, and welcome back. Tonight my voice has actually come back quite a bit. It was kind of failing me a little bit the other night when I was recording my last video. I'm still out of town, and we'll be heading back to my place hopefully by this weekend. So I wanted to go ahead and follow up with a video kind of giving some insight into the male perspective on things like what men are actually looking for in a relationship, and in a way attempting to simplify. Now, I realize I'm speaking in terms of generalities. This isn't going to apply to every single man. There's going to be lots of men out there that don't, well, not maybe lots, but quite a few that are not going to necessarily fit what I'm about to describe here. I'm drawing mostly from, I would say, a cross-section of men that generally are gainfully employed. They work hard at their life. They are people that tend to be responsible. They tend to be, somebody that has some level of stability in their life. So I'm not referring to somebody who is more geared towards basically being a player out hitting the clubs, or somebody who has any issues with chemical abuse. They're addicted to alcohol, drugs, whatever. Where we're not talking about people that are the outliers that you might find that tend to be a lot of the troublemakers that you usually end up hearing about. And just to make it clear, I'm not putting down any guys out there that are not ready to commit for whatever reason. I'm specifically referring to guys that are maybe looking for a relationship or something and trying to shed light on what it is that, for the most part, men are looking for. So I'm going to really try to simplify it. This is just based off of some of my own personal experiences, but a lot of things I've just picked up from just what guys have been saying just all over the place on other podcasts when they've been interviewed and asked about this sort of thing. And one major factor that seems to interconnect with everything is a level of personal peace. They want somebody in their life that is going to match or be close to the same level of personal peace that you're walking in. And it kind of directly challenges a lot of what's being pushed out there right now. A lot of what's being pushed out there right now is women actually going around saying things like, well, don't you want somebody who's a challenge? Don't you want somebody that's challenging in some way? And failing to understand that basically, and this is my take on it, but this has been the take of many, many men that have heard this sort of thing, mentioned on podcasts and mentioned in other different places. When you say, don't you want a challenge, what we're generally equating that with is almost every single time the challenge is somebody who has inner demons and anger issues that they now want to take that drama and that trouble and just regularly, instead of challenging it in their own lives, they want to regularly dump that onto their partner. Now, there are men that do this too. We can talk about that at another time, but we're just talking about what men are after and what they're looking for in a relationship. And one of the major factors that is a factor today, just because of the environment, with everything that we've been talking about, with the hookup culture, with just the way everything's kind of getting pushed and shoved, and the whole trying to view men and women as being exactly the same, when in reality we're not at all. Where there's so many differences that complement each other, but we are not the same. So women that come at this with the point of, don't you want somebody that's a challenge? It usually ends up being a front for a high level of contentiousness, arguments, and fighting. Now, I guess one point I would address with that, just something to consider. If you're in that level of stress and fighting with an individual, like if you're a woman who is struggling with that with the guy that you're with, maybe that's not the right guy. Or maybe your expectations are completely out of whack with what is realistic. Something certainly to consider. That's certainly food for thought. But you have to realize that the men that you're dealing with, that might be somebody that you potentially would want to be in relationship with, they do not want to come home to a battle. Like I myself, I run more than one business. I work my butt off. I do film work on the side. I do all sorts of different stuff all over the place. Last thing I would want to do is, after all the battles that I fight out there, come home to somebody who is basically ready to start World War III with me at any given point and ready to ramp up the drama. And part of the reason why I've noticed that not only myself, but a lot of men across the board look at it this way is we realize, as we're looking out over life and trying to figure out who we're going to have be in life with and have a partner through life with, that we're going to have issues where, family members pass away, people that we love and care about end up maybe getting sick, our own health or the person's health that we're in a relationship with might have a downturn. There could be all sorts of different financial things that shift in life, all the way down to natural disasters and, God help us, World War III or something, something crazy like that. We know that there's going to be major issues coming at some point in life. All of us are going to carry them, and we want to reserve our time and our effort for those things and not for any type of manufactured drama or something where somebody is extremely angry or has a lot of inner demons that they're just not facing, and they just tend to explode all over the place. And I think to some degree, women can relate to this too. There are men out there that they don't have any sense of self, which is, of course, very unattractive from what I've heard. You don't have a sense of self and a drive in your own life, personally and professionally. And on top of all of that, whenever you run into problems out there, these are men that come back home and get mad and completely snap and start throwing stuff and are completely out of control. And instead of confronting the people that cause that stress in their life, they come back home and they take it out on somebody. Well, in similar regard, men don't want women that list themselves right out the gate as a challenge, because 9 times out of 10, that's what's going to happen is the guy's going to land himself in a situation where there's just massive levels of contention when he comes home. Now, you might say, well, aren't there all these other factors? Well, looks shift depending upon the guy. What he's looking for, what he's looking for as far as physical attraction. Any guy could pick any number of different things and say, those are the traits that I like. When it comes to personality, you could say something generalized like, I want somebody with a sense of humor, or that will watch movies with me or has some similar interest. And you can throw all that stuff around all over the place. But I think a lot of it comes down to, with all of those things considered, if you don't have this one, none of the rest of it's going to matter. If you don't have personal peace that somewhat matches the partner that you're with, you're never going to be able to build a future. You're never going to be able to have any real stability, because both of you have to come together. When you're done facing all the crap that's out there, when you're done facing all the battles that are happening out there, you both have to be able to come together and have some semblance of unity and something that you can build on together so that you're not at odds with each other. You can't be enemies at home and face the enemies outside. You need to have somebody where you're standing together. And I know that sounds almost overly simplified, but I think to some degree it needs to be. I think to some degree we have to apply some logic and some reason and some sanity, like I've always said, to this situation. And that just is the sanest approach, is you cannot expect to have just an infusion of drama constantly happening and then be shocked when you end up driving people away. So this is, more in regards of what men are looking for generally across the board, is we are looking for peace that we can maintain on somewhat of a reasonable basis. Now, there's going to be times where there's going to be disagreements and arguments. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you've got personal demons and stuff's getting thrown across the room, or you're accusing somebody on the basis of something that there's just no proof for, or you've got massive issues that just seem to erupt at any given point. We're talking about stuff like that, like major anger issues. Like, you tend to shove your guy or try to start something physical and try to dare them to do something. I've heard of situations like that happening. And you have to understand, if you're trying to goad them that way, the only thing you're going to do is drive them away, because they obviously are not going to be inclined to want to get involved in that situation. And it's not whether or not you want to say, sure, they can do something and they can, get aggressive with me right back. No guy wants to live with an enemy. And I'm sure likewise, women probably feel the same way. You don't want to live with somebody that you're permanently at odds with, that most of the time you don't agree on anything. And another point that I would, just kind of throw out there and see, I'm curious to have y'all's take on it as well. What do you all think about all this? So, another thing that I've noticed that a lot of men are kind of drawn to is the lack of the feminine. Now, when I say feminine, what I'm talking about is something you have to kind of understand is the more masculine you try to portray yourself as a woman, the more masculine you try and come across as, men are generally going to be turned off to that just because we're not interested in masculine traits. Men are attracted to feminine traits. We just are. And now feminine traits could be any number of different things, but a feminine trait is something that is going to draw a guy in. We don't want somebody that's trying to act like a dude, because we don't want to date a dude. I've heard somebody say it that way before, and I think that really clarifies it. If you're trying your hardest to act like you're another man in the relationship, you're going to turn off the person that you're with. Now, obviously, I've heard responses to this where, people have said, well, if he was enough of a man, I wouldn't have to do that. You have to realize that a lot of the times attempting to be in a struggle like that with somebody, maybe that's just the wrong person. Maybe it's just the wrong person for you. But realistically speaking, if you keep presenting that sort of thing, then you're going to have a problem with that. Now, before anybody, jumps off the, bandwagon here and just starts to freak out on me, when I say feminine traits, you have to realize that men and women complement each other. Men and women complement each other. We're meant to fit together in ways that complement each other and build each other up. This is not some sort of a competition over, who's going to do which chores or in what order you have arranged with somebody as to what's going to work best for you. This is realizing that the two of you complement each other and you cannot be enemies and have it work out. And if you have a logical understanding of that and realize how that's going to affect your life in the future, you begin to kind of get to a point where maybe you have a level of personal peace that will match the other person's. And this applies to men too. Men have to come into the situation, and that's why I kind of led this with a, sort of a precursor of this isn't going to apply to every guy that's out there. There are a lot of men out there that have massive levels of problems, and you just can't start relationships with them, or they're not even looking for it. There's no level of personal peace you're going to bring to that that's going to fix that. They already have to, get to a point where they want to be in a relationship in the first place anyway. So generalities only work because they're generally true, but there will always be exceptions. And, I've noticed that a lot of the times people like to try to argue the exception to the rule as if the exception is the rule. And that's just not the case. Sometimes when you deal with generalities, you just have to accept the fact that it's mostly true. Not completely always true all the time, but mostly true. And I think it would probably sum this up with a realization that, when it comes to the personal piece, there's just no beating that. You don't want to be in a situation where it's just utterly and completely contentious. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants that at all. I know the men don't want it, the women don't, but when it comes to men and how they view women, when it comes to physical shape, size, attractiveness, that just varies all the way across the board. And when it comes to what your type of sense of humor is, what you like to do for entertainment, that varies all the way across the board. But there are some things that you just can't do without. And that is a major thing right there. Personal peace. If you can't find a way to have peace and be able to rest with this person and basically almost stand by each other and have each other's back and to some degree strategize and stand with them. If you're in a relationship with somebody and they're out there and they're working their butt off, they don't even have to necessarily be running a business. If they're out there working their butt off constantly every single day and they're dealing with all the battles and struggles out there, they're not going to want to come back to another battle and another struggle. You're never going to package that to sell that to any man whatsoever. Some simps might actually roll with that for a period of time. They're going to resent you for it. Most men are going to run from that these days because we're just not interested in somebody who is so angry, so frustrated, and so, just not in control or hasn't faced their personal demons enough to where it's not going to erupt into, frustration, irritation, throwing things all the way down to just generally being unhappy. And that doesn't all completely fall onto the women. You might be in a situation with a guy where you just realize, after several months in, you're starting to get to know this person, and you realize that there's no future here because I just am not happy with the way they handle things. I hate the way they do stuff around the house, and I hate the way that they don't clean up, or they just basically make a giant mess and they don't care about anything. And you realize that the two of you just don't have any compatibility there. That's completely okay. Leave and find somebody else. Attempting to make that happen will just make you miserable too. So there are some men that, like I've said, are not going to fit that, and you have to accept it for what it is. If they're just not going to, better to go find somebody else than to try and shift and change them into another person. And I guess one thing I would probably throw in there as well, at the risk of sounding long-winded, I've realized the video is starting to get a little bit longer than I usually do, but a lot of the times I've noticed over time, described by many, many different people across the board, men ending up in a situation where women want to change them to a certain degree to try and match something that they would like to see. And although there is some changes that you have to do if you're going to have a good personal relationship together, there's some changes you have to go through that are going to make it work. But you have to be really careful that you don't eliminate things that originally attracted you to that individual in the first place. Their drive, their motivation, obviously there has to be a little bit of curbing of some of that. If you're going to have a functional relationship, both parties have to give to a certain degree. But you want to make sure that you never completely remove the individuality. And when I'm saying individuality, I'm not talking about going out and acting single. Total difference between the two things. The individuality is some of the personal drives, some of the things creatively, professionally, in a number of different ways that a man will do that tends to attract women. You don't want to eliminate that completely, because if you do, you'll find yourself creating and pushing that individual into something that even you won't like. They won't like it, and even you won't like it in the future. Certainly something to consider the boundaries of, at least food for thought. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to hear all about what your experiences are, your thoughts about this in the comments. And as always, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'm going to be putting up a bunch more videos coming up, and looking forward to talking to everybody again soon. Have a great night.